You are free to practice your religion in any way you please, but you're not allowed to have your religion dictate the lives of other people, right?
Yep, you really did see that, folks. On rare occasions, Anna Kasparian is capable of taking a break from spewing out complete bollocks and says the truth once in a while. Now, let's see it all within context. And remember, it's a discussion about perceived discrimination, perceived persecution. Take it away, the young turds.
The Public Religion Research Institute recently polled Americans of different religious backgrounds to see what they think about religious discrimination here in the United States. And the results are actually pretty interesting and surprising.
So I had a quick look at this Public Religion Research Institute, just for a bit of insight on who they are. On the face of it, they claim to be, and I quote, a non-profit, non-partisan organisation dedicated to conducting independent research at the intersection of religion, culture and public policy. Seems legit. Until you learn that their CEO is Robert P. Jones, a columnist for The Atlantic, by which all accounts is a leftist publication. So you can guess that the organisation is all about make all religions accepted, especially one, no matter what, rather than an honest look at how some religions are more multiculturally compatible than others.
Now, what the pollsters wanted to do was compare discrimination, or at least perceptions of discrimination, against Christians versus Muslims.
Sounds pretty much like a race baiting poll, made specifically for people like themselves to, go and attack someone who doesn't go along with the narrative. But sure, go ahead.
And the vast majority of people who were polled did believe or agree that Muslims are discriminated against more compared to Christians, except for one group, one demographic. Now, overall, people were twice as likely to say Muslims face discrimination as they were to say the same thing about Christians.
Remember, we're talking about a perceived discrimination. And while we live in a time where most religious-based terrorism in the West is done by Muslims, plus the fact that their ideology for the most part is incompatible with Western values, a lot of people do have some genuine concerns regarding Islam. So Muslims will perceive that as discrimination.
Now, the people who stuck out, whose perceptions were radically different from others in the survey, were white evangelical Protestants. Among this group, 57% said there's a lot of discrimination against Christians in the US today. Only 44% said the same thing about Muslims.
Well, holy shit! How dare that 57% have that opinion?
It's my favorite story in a long time. It's so great.
Well, of course, you'd love this story, since it's all about a section of the human race that isn't part of your protected class that feels marginalised. I love how he calls people clowns. This is the guy that spat tea in Alex Jones's face and then ran off like a little spineless bitch.
Like, it worked. You got the least victimized people in the world, except maybe for like Saudi princes, to believe that they are the subject of discrimination and that they are the victims in today's America.
Now, I don't believe there's a war on Christmas, like some of the Fox News pundits claim. However, I can understand why they think this. Every year there's a couple of major large to moderate budget film releases about Christmas, then a whole slew of straight-to-cable Hallmark dramas centred around the holidays. But how many of these Christmas movies actually mention, even in passing, the birth of Christ? Hardly any. I'm not going to get into the whole origins of Yuletide and the assimilation between Christianity and paganism, but you'd still think that, along with mentioning Christmas spirit and the struggle to get the perfect gift, that the birth of one of the most influential men in history, whether he was real or not, would be relevant in these films. So that's one of the reasons behind this perceived marginalisation. One could argue that they should suck it up, since no other holiday gets nearly as much representation in movies. But that's the point. They're never shown as religious at all.
Yeah, now the good news is white mainline Protestants, rock and roll, right at exactly the national average, 63% saying yes, Muslims are discriminated, only 30% saying that about Christians, 2-to-1 margin. White Catholics, even higher, 64-26.
Yay, the Protestants and Catholics are towing the line. Well done, white people, believing the leftist media.
So I'm going to say the most obvious thing in the world, this isn't about white folks, this isn't about Christians.
Yes, it's not about white folks. And it's not about Christians. But we're going to make it about white Christians. Did I sound like Paul Joseph Watson then? Oops.
It is a particular subculture of evangelicals who've been taught a certain thing, and by the way, they are more prone to propaganda because they're the ones who believe whatever my pastor tells me that God says, including about how he has to get rich and fly around in private jets I paid for. I believe it unquestioningly, right?
To be fair, I do agree with Cenk on this. If anyone can be convinced that by donating hundreds and thousands of dollars to a mega-rich pastor that lives in an upscale part of town, safely behind walls protecting themselves and their families from the real world, and so they can spend that money on trips around the globe, so they can convince other people to donate the hard-earned money to their cause, and think they're going to buy their way in heaven, well, they kind of deserve to be scammed.
So I believe that I am the victim, even though I have every advantage in America, and that it's those dastardly Muslims that somehow, have power or privilege in America? Can anybody make that case? Apparently they think they can.
And this is where we lose him in the white privilege echo chamber. Although they perceive this whole group to have been born with all the benefits and power of the middle class and above, this is not always the case. They don't have more or less privilege than any other race or religious group. And let's not forget who the real victims are, right? Because for every kafir murdered by an Islamist terrorist, the real victims of this perceived discrimination are all the Muslims who have to read all the online comments about how Islam is not a religion of peace. Oh, those poor little lambs.
I know. What's incredible, though, is prior to the election, a larger percentage of them believed that Muslims were discriminated against versus today, right? So let me give you those numbers. I thought that was interesting. When this question was asked in a December 2013 PRRI survey, 59% of white evangelicals said they think Muslims face a lot of discrimination. As late as last October, 56% said this was the case. As of February, though, that number had dropped by 12 percentage points.
So people aren't allowed to change their minds? I'm not sure she realises how the concept of information over time can help influence people's opinions.
So all the way from 59 to 44. Why? Because they're so prone to propaganda.
Everyone to a certain degree is prone to propaganda. For instance, most Young Turks viewers probably believe all the crap that they put out. That Trump is literally Hitler and he hates women and gays and disabled people and those bloody Jews!
As soon as the dear leader Donald Trump said, no, Muslims don't get discriminated against, they go, okay, that's it, Muslims don't get discriminated against.
Generally they don't. But we're not talking about actual discrimination, we're talking about perceived discrimination, remember? That's the whole point of this video, right?
Now, you want to know the reality, 22% of religiously motivated crimes are against Muslims, even though they are less than 1% of the population.
Right.
Are these actual crimes, or is he counting all the fake reports where it turns out that they were made up by the alleged victims? Or are they general crimes that they claim to be religiously motivated but turn out not to be? Or are nasty online comments about Muhammad and Islam being treated as hate crimes? I'd prefer to see the citations for these hate crime stats, to be honest.
Right, and if you want to compare that to Christians, Catholics that have been discriminated against or are victims of hate crimes, that number is 13.6%. And of course, they account for a larger percentage of the population.
They account for over 70% of the largest.
That's because there's not much current dirt on Catholics to throw at them. Apart from the IRA attacks that stopped when dialogue started, and the pedo priest being protected by the Vatican, the majority of Catholics are no different from any other secular or atheist individual. When was the last time you saw in a Catholic majority country gays being hung or threw off buildings, or adulterers being stoned to death? This is why people seem to be uncomfortable with Muslims until they know for sure that they're moderate and don't want to behead all those who eat bacon.
By the way, the group that's not in this study, but in other studies, the group that gets the most amount of hate crimes, religiously motivated hate crimes, are Jews in America.
Interesting how Cenk brought up the Jews weren't part of this study. Please comment below on your thoughts on why the poll was only for Muslims and Christians on who feel the most marginalised and left Jewish people out of this study.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt you, go ahead.
I think it's also more than propaganda, it's just the visibility of Muslims and Islam as a legitimate religion. Some Christians experience that as a decentering, right? And they experience that decentering as being marginalized or oppressed themselves, which is false. And I think it also obscures the fact that there are Christians actually being persecuted, like really persecuted in other spaces, because this isn't persecution, this isn't discrimination. I think it's just having to reconcile the visibility of other religions in this pluralistic society that we say we live in.
While I agree that the evangelicals are not being persecuted in any Western country, and no other race or religion is either by the majority of society or any lawful government in the West, I do understand why they perceive it that way. The most obvious form is through mainstream comedy. You can make fun of evangelicals, Catholics, Scientologists, Mormons, even Jews, and there's some very good reasons to mock all of them, and any other faith. No religion is above mockery. But God forbid anyone makes jokes about Islam. This protected class creates divisions, and anyone outside of that protective bubble may perceive that as themselves being marginalized.
They view it as, for example, the 2015 Supreme Court decision that legalized gay marriage. That is the thing that they cite most often as, you see how we're victimized.
Right.
Wait, so let's just understand this right. Because gay couples get to have the same rights as straight couples, that they have the same constitutional rights, evangelical Christians look at that and go, oh, they took my right to discriminate against you away. They took my right to be above you away from me. Right. I'm a victim. Sure. I mean, you want to talk about a special snowflake.
While I fully support gay marriage myself and find anyone who would be against it to be retarded, since it doesn't hurt anyone else, however, we're now living in a time where freedom of religion is affected. Take the bakery in Oregon, for instance. They refused to bake a cake for a lesbian wedding, which, as a business owner, you should have the right to refuse custom from anyone, on any grounds you so wish, even if it's because of your backwards beliefs. So Sweet Cakes by Melissa were dragged through the courts and fined $135,000 for refusing to bake a fucking cake. Sweet Cakes chose to not accept the gay couple's business on the grounds that they believe that gay marriage is against God's will, and that's part of their faith. Even though I completely disagree with Sweet Cakes, it's my belief that God really doesn't give a fuck who marries whom. I fully support their right to an opinion, and that they should be allowed to refuse custom for any reason they choose. They were literally, not figuratively, but 100% literally, religiously persecuted by the state of Oregon because of their faith, and were fined $135,000 because of it. So yes, some Christians are being persecuted in America. Would this ever happen to a Muslim business? Of course it wouldn't. I long for the day when a gay or lesbian couple ask a traditional Muslim Turkish kebab place to cater for their wedding. Here in the UK, this fast food is a popular favourite after a night on the town. It might look like shit, but it is heaven in a pita bread for a drunk. So it would in fact be a perfect addition to any working class or middle class wedding reception. So I'd love to know if any gay couple would consider approaching a caterer like this for their wedding reception, and see if they get refused. And if the Muslim kebab place refuses, would they get a fine? Or be made to pay an unfair legal costs or damages? I bet they wouldn't. Would mainstream media report on it? Doubtful. Probably just the right-wing media outlets, but all that would be perceived as is bias against Islam, so hardly helpful in any meaningful way.
These guys, if you tell them something pleasant like happy holidays, they think they're a victim.
Yeah.
If you say, hey, congratulations, you get equal rights, they think they're a victim.
Fuck me, talk about a straw man. No, they are not being victimised. But what's wrong with telling someone Merry Christmas? What's wrong with saying Happy Hanukkah to a Jew? Just because someone doesn't share their beliefs, it's not going to hurt anyone to say Christmas or Hanukkah. If it's more appropriate to the intended receiver, would you say to a Muslim on Ramadan, Happy Holidays, have a pulled pork sandwich because we're being more inclusive? Or would you wish them a happy Ramadan?
So in their view, marriage is this religious sacred thing, and same-sex marriage is against all of that, and allowing gay couples to get married goes against their religion, and that's attacking their religion in some way.
But it should be part of their religious freedom to be against it if they so wish, just as it is our freedom of speech to mock such backwards ideas. As much as the young turds will say that these people are the majority, the actual number of Christians against gay marriage, as far as I'm aware, are a minority.
Like, that's the line of reasoning they have, which is ridiculous.
No, that's your line of reasoning on why you can bundle everyone together who notice how certain religions gets pandered to, whilst others get fined for their beliefs and sticking to them.
And look, we live in a country that is supposed to believe in a separation of church and state, meaning you are free to practice your religion in any way you please, but you're not allowed to have your religion dictate the lives of other people, right?
I'm saving that clip for posterity. It'll come in handy someday, I'm sure. Anyway, that's enough from me for today. Until I see you next time, have a great day.